I'm so glad that you're here today. I want to thank, of course, Nexus Earth right off the bat for helping to make this panel a reality. Thank you for joining us today. I am Christina Tobin, the founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation, and today we have with us here today Mr. Ernie Hancock of Declare, yes? Mr. Dennis Kucinich. And Jesse the Body Ventura. So we're going to be focusing today, I feel, on a topic. I can speak for myself and maybe listening to these other gentlemen for the last decade or so of my life, really passionate about breaking the stranglehold of the two-party duopoly. So really, we want to definitely allow some time at the end to engage questions, because it's really more about hearing what is of interest to the people about maybe the rigged electoral system and so on. So before we get started, or as we get started and we go here, let's start with brief introductions with everybody. Can I start with Ernie here on the left, please?
Ernest Hancock. 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, declare your independence with me, Ernest Hancock. And you don't have to do it with me. You can do it by yourself. I declare my independence. See how easy it was? No government form. And this is the concept. And I've been involved in elections for a long time. In 1988, I realized what was going on. 90, I got standing. I filed 44 election laws, argued oral argument all the way before the Ninth Circuit. So I got a bunch of Ernie laws. And what I realized is election law is where they control dissent and make sure that it's not heard. You may choose from communist candidate A or fascist candidate B as if it's illusion of choice. From that experience, all my activism has come to just understanding the truth about politics and where you can really have an impact. And that's where I hope to steer it.
Well, I guess I'll go next. We'll just go down the line. I'm Christina Tobin, the founder of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. Our mission is to broaden electoral choices through education and direct positive action as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So really, the first time Free and Equal came about was pretty much at the time, last time I met Jesse Ventura in 2008. Ralph Nader put on an Open the Debates rally, and I learned about the corruption of the Commission on Presidential Debates, and Free and Equal hosted our first nationally televised presidential debate in 2008 with Ralph Nader and Chuck Baldwin. So since then, we've been working to address the rigged electoral system between our presidential debates we're really known for in 2012, with Larry King and I moderating, and Ed Asner 16, festivals, symposiums, apps, and so on. So I'm very honored and humbled to be joining these individuals today who have been a huge inspiration in helping to pave the way, I feel, for a real independent candidates movement. So thank you for joining us today. Again, thank you for having me.
I'm Dennis Kucinich from Cleveland, Ohio, where I served as a city councilman, clerk of courts, mayor, state senator, member of Congress, and presidential candidate twice. My political career is something I chose. As a young person in Cleveland, my first election was 50 years ago, and I've won 32 out of 40 elections. Now, my approach to politics has rejected the polarized thinking, which is really at the basis of our political system today, the us versus them, which is really a precursor of war. And I'm so happy to be here because this kind of a discussion gives us an opportunity to create new possibilities. And there's certainly a need for a new social, economic, and political analysis that we can carry into the future, because it is about the future. And we need to think about how we can change the present outcome. And if there's anything that I've done in my public career, it's to really develop a kind of physics which looks at exigent circumstances, looks at things as they are. And so many times I've had people say, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, going back to Cleveland in my early days, you can't save that park, the deal's already cut, you can't save that electric system, it's already sold. Those are the things that interest me, where they say it can't be done. Because if, with vision and with courage, we have the ability to envision new possibilities, new outcomes. In physics, it's kind of teasing apart the interstitial spaces, the things that hold matter together, and find that other reality, identify it, name it, pull it forward, and set it into motion. That's what I'm about. Thanks.
Governor Jesse Ventura, I was the 38th governor of the great state of Minnesota. Might add, independent governor. I've never belonged to either, as I refer to them, either gang, the Demo-Crips or the Republicans, as I like to refer to them, and wrote a book of that title, apologizing to the Crips and Bloods for using their name in that manner. Yeah, you got to throw a little humor in, come on. Anyway, though, I'm born in Minneapolis. I'm a high school graduate. At 18, I enlisted in the United States Navy in 1969 at a time when it was not popular to go into the U.S. military. We were not being praised. We were not being cheered. We were not being football games played in our benefit and all that. In fact, it was just the opposite. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I served 6 years in the United States Navy. I'm a member of the Special Forces Underwater Demolition SEAL Teams. And many of us came home from Vietnam and didn't tell anyone we were veterans because it wasn't fashionable to do it then. You were looked down upon. They blamed the war on the warrior instead of blaming it on the politician where it belonged. The warrior only fights the war. He or she has no choice in the matter, per se. It's the politician who should be blamed, not the service person. You're carrying out orders, you don't have the choice. Anyway, I got out of the service, embarked on, couldn't sing or dance, so I found something else that allowed me to perform. And I've even been to Dennis's hometown, Cleveland. I got into the world of professional wrestling and did that for 15 years. And I'll jump forward quick. I taught at Harvard when I got out, which I thought only in America can a high school graduate be a Harvard fellowship professor. But while I was teaching at Harvard, and I'll brag, I had the largest classes in Harvard history. They had to move me to the Commons building because so many wanted to attend my class. And one of the classes I took or taught was how pro wrestling prepares you for politics. And let me tell you this, Donald Trump would fear me because Donald Trump has dealt in pro wrestling. He hosted a couple WrestleManias when I was there, and he knows he can't out-talk a wrestler. Trump knows this, so he will fear me if I ever jump in. But that aside, and the humor aside, I stumbled into the world. I was in pro wrestling 15 years, and then I stumbled into the world of politics. I had no attention, really. It was local. Many people don't realize I was mayor of the 6th largest city from 1990 to 94. And I beat a 25-year incumbent 67% to 33. Dennis, is that a landslide?
Absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to get verification on that. But then I like to refer to myself as a statesman. I have great respect for Dennis. He's one of the few, I will tell you, I greatly respect. But I refer to myself as a statesman rather than a politician, and here's my definition. A politician makes it a career. A statesman serves and then goes back to what he or she used to do. That's what I do. I do one term. I did one term as mayor. 4 years later, I came out, ran for governor, was successful, defeated the Democrats and Republicans a second time. Although the first election was nonpartisan, the leaders of the Democrats and Republicans co-signed a letter and sent it to every citizen of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, calling me the most dangerous man in the city, and that they supported the incumbent, 25-year incumbent mayor. Well, here's when I realized those two parties are full of crap. After I won overwhelmingly, and they called me the most dangerous man in the city, 2 weeks later, they were both independently coming up to me trying to get me to join their party. And I thought, wait a minute, you just opposed me Now it's because I can win. I belong in your party because I can win. Not who I am or what I stand for. You can win. Well, I chose not to. There was this rise of this independence party in Minnesota, a bunch of disgruntled Democrats and Republicans who didn't believe in the current system of bribery, which is how our government politics runs today, off bribery. You bribe them, you get your wish. You don't, try getting in the door. Anyway, long story short, ended up running for governor, won, and I will tell you this, I only raised $300,000 to be the governor of Minnesota. They combined spent $12 million and lost. So for those of you, Trump watched what I did. He came and visited me. He did the same. He was out of my playbook this last election. I was telling them, rather than raising money, which was what Hillary was doing, he was doing rallies. That's what I did. I didn't raise money. I went to rallies. Rallying won. Money didn't. I won, so did Trump. Not raising money, going to rallies. So the form of politics, I think, has shifted a little now. Money isn't the main, necessarily the focus. But then after winning, I served one term. Many people ask me why I didn't serve a second term. I will tell you honestly, financial. I was CEO of a $16 billion a year industry, and after taxes, I made 60 grand a year. I think we need to pay our public CEOs a little more money to get better people. When it stops you from running because you're going to go broke, or you can't maintain your lifestyle because it doesn't pay you enough, that's a problem, people.
Definitely.
And it's a problem to stay honest. I will say this and end. In my 4 years in office as governor, I never met with a lobbyist once. Never. I didn't need them. They didn't elect me. What do I need to meet with them for? You know, so I didn't. So you can imagine how they wanted me gone, because there's people, that's all they make their living off of, is gaining access to the public officials so you can bribe them. End of story. Now, back in the private sector, did conspiracy theory and all that. Then I got run out, and thank goodness Russian television has given me my free speech back again. And that's weird to say, people. The Russians have given me free speech over my own country.
I just read an article yesterday that U.S. investors are pulling out of RT. It's kind of interesting. So
Really?
yeah, check it out. Forward it to you. And Dennis, so you
Doesn't surprise me.
yeah, Dennis,
That's what they did to the XFL, too.
I'll forward it to you and Terry.
Oh, they did.
Dennis, your last race, you didn't win. What happened?
My district was cut up into 5 pieces. So I had to choose which one I could run from.
You mean
And
gerrymandered?
it was gerrymandered,
yeah.
but what's interesting is, you know, while I spent the time in Congress as a Democrat, it was the Democrats in Ohio who cut my seat up because I'm not interested in the party line on anything. They wanted to freeze out, and my point of view, which is decidedly independent. When I was elected mayor of Cleveland, I defeated both political parties to get elected at age 30 and 31, the youngest person ever elected mayor of a big city at that time. And as a matter of fact, just finishing up revisions on a book which talks about this experience of not just getting in as a young person, but taking on both political parties, the corporate establishment, the media, and the mob. And what happens when you come in with clean hands and you leave with clean hands. But the challenge is to stand for what you believe in.
Yep.
This whole idea that, I'll tell you, I've never understood groupthink, never. The idea that you go to somebody who's a broker at a bankrupt brokerage to tell you how you should vote. I've never understood that. And I think that is one of the reasons why our politics today is so dumbed down, because the independent thinking, which is necessary in order to inspire people, is really lacking. And so and I'd like to, as we get into this discussion, talk about some of the consequences of a lack of independent thinking in the government today.
Wonderful. Thank you. So,
I'd like to-
Ernie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to expand on this. I mean, I just want to make sure you guys all know where I'm standing, okay? This is what's interesting is I've been through this process. I know Jesse came to Arizona. He was supportive of a state senator that, brought up 9/11. And he's absolutely comes to Arizona. We worked on that. I remember in the Senate Majority Caucus room in the Arizona legislature telling us about the CIA wanted to meet with him in the basement. He got to be governor, and that what really goes on. So that went viral, a video on that.
23 of them.
Yeah, no, it was amazing story. If you don't know that, you need to go look it up. Dennis has been on my radio show a couple of times. I was a radio show host on a local Air America affiliate, their token libertarian. And during the Levolution with Ron Paul, who am I talking to? Well, the people are just beating the drum for the left, and it's Obama or it was Hillary or whatever. But the only ones that I could have any kind of conversation with were the supporters of Dennis. So when Dennis Kucinich was running at that time, an anti-war principled individual, that in fact has a good relationship with Dr. Ron Paul. So we have always had kind of an affinity for Dennis and what he stood for. Christina, when she started doing the third party or alternative, I don't remember what you called it. It was
Open debates.
Yeah, it was a debate
Mainstream media tagged
with
it
Larry
third party.
King, and we heavily supported this being done because I understand how politics really works. The problem is, in 2002, you have a to-do list. I got a checkbox. I'm going to do this and this and this, vote today, pick up kids from school, whatever. Usually when you check that box, hey, I accomplished something. I'm good. I'm going to the next thing. When I checked the box, I went and voted, I felt dirty inside. I felt something was wrong. So I don't do it anymore. Now, that doesn't stop me from running. I've run for Congress 3 times. I ran against John McCain in 2004 as the Libertarian candidate because he said how libertarian he was in the Chicago Tribune. And I go, oh, hell no, you don't get to do that, Mr. Maverick. So ran against that. I ran for Secretary of State twice, state legislature, county recorder. And the reason for Secretary of State in '94 was to predict what was going to happen using computers. In 2004, it all came to pass in Arizona. It was a big controversy, and I ran in 2006. In 2006, you're still voting with the V for Vendetta as the V. You'll look it up, still voting with a question mark. You'll see it in Google Images. But in that campaign, we had the Levolution logo. I'm the one that created the Ron Paul Levolution logo. Now, Ron Paul had spoken at 3 of our freedom summits that we do in Arizona, 2 of them prior to that. So we knew what was going to happen. He was going to get up and say, I'm libertarian. They're going to say, you're really a libertarian. He goes, yeah, and you're really a statist. I mean, we knew he was not going to run away from it. And when he did, we just marched in, we just march out, all this libertarian freedom-oriented rhetoric. The reason that I was so supportive and hammered on the Levolution and helped that spread around the country, going around teaching people how to make signs. What are you going to say on them? Doesn't matter. Make the sign. Why? Because my goal had nothing to do with voting, nothing to do with vote totals, nothing to do with anything other than keeping Dr. Paul at that podium for as long as possible. And in 8 and 12, he went all the way. He was first runner-up. Why? Because of culture. The power of everything that we're going to talk about, I guarantee, I want to give you an example of how just opinion, culture, technology, and activism changes everything much more. And this conference is a perfect example of it. There is going to be more impact on individual people's lives around the world way outside of any vote total. I guarantee it. Let's talk.
Well, great. How do I follow up after these guys? We know a lot of the issues, right? We're here to talk about how do we break the stranglehold of the 2-party system, some of the problems we kind of touched a bit, the corruption of the commission on presidential debates that's run by the former chairs of Democratic and Republican parties, and to gerrymandering. Kucinich was wrongfully, did not win his last race, I feel, and many others, because of gerrymandering. Alternative voting methods. Why do we only have singular vote when we should have alternative voting methods like instant runoff voting, fair vote just recently pushed out in Maine. Approval voting, score voting, all these different options that are just, well, any are better than what we currently have. Paper ballots versus blockchain voting is definitely something the Free and Equal Elections Foundation will be expanding on with our 4th annual Electoral Reform Symposium at Infinity Park in Glendale, Colorado, this November 18th. And the president of League of Women Voters of Colorado will be speaking at that as well. You know, paper ballots, do we, so blockchain voting, are we there yet? You know, those are sort of things that we're going to bring the experts together to discuss, and more so. Electoral college versus popular vote. Those will be also discussed at our symposiums, our presidential debates and so on, and initiatives we do, proportional representation. So I'm bringing up all these topics because these may be of interest to some of our speakers here on the panel. But I wanted to also say, with free and equal elections, my topic that I'm very passionate about, on top of the Commission on Presidential Debates, which I know Jesse might have a few strong words about them, is ballot access. I mean, just to get on the ballot. I saw my dad right there, who's here, Jim Tobin of Taxpayers United of America, ran for governor as a Libertarian in '98 when I was 17 years old, and I saw him wrongfully knocked off the ballot by the State Board of Elections, even after the hearing officer recommended he be placed on the ballot. And then I learned, why does the third parties have to get 25,000 signatures in Illinois versus D's and R's only 5,000? And then a couple of years later, this guy by the name of Mr. Ralph Nader gave me a call and hired me to, statewide. In 2008, I worked as his national ballot access coordinator. I just managed a 500,000 signature ballot drive. I'm an organizer and a visionary, I would say. When everybody said there was no way he could get on the ballot, well, in '04, the Democratic Party challenged and successfully knocked Mr. Nader off the ballot in 32 states when he was really at his peak. And so in '08, when he ran as an independent, we started at 0 ballot lines, while the third parties or libertarians started like 32, 36. We still surpassed the Libertarian Party. So I have learned the independent presidential race. If somebody were to run for president, and I hope there's many in 2020, 24, it takes 900,000 signatures or so just to get on the ballot. So that means you have to collect 1.6 million at least, which costs anywhere from 8 to 10 million, upwards of 20 million if you launch the ballot drives right before the actual deadlines start arising. So this is a rigged electoral system. Good candidates like my dad don't even get a chance to get on the ballot. Obama's competitors, I was in the heart of the Chicago electoral system for 10 years, up against the Daley and the Madigan and the Manuel faction, Obama, and they knocked the good candidates off. They don't even give it a chance. But Obama, every candidate that ran against him was knocked off the ballot. So that's something I'm very passionate about. I'd love for the gentleman here to briefly to talk about things that they're passionate about. And then maybe we can really shift right into the cultural change solution, the lack of independent thinking, or how more so we can bring about more independent thinking would be great.
Well, I tell it like it is usually and get in trouble, but I'll tell you this, we have only ourselves to blame in a lot of ways, because I find it very interesting. Minnesota and Maine lead the nation every election in per capita voter turnout. We're always in a battle with Maine and Minnesota to see who's going to win. And I find it pathetic in a non-presidential year, you can win with 50% across the nation. That's the point I'm making, is that half of us are the only ones that participate. Why is that? Well, part of the reason is our current power structure of what they're talking about up here. They make it so difficult that many people just give up on the system and they don't want to participate in it. Oh, I don't care. My vote doesn't matter anyway. And you end up with 1 out of 2 people are all that vote in this country. That's pathetic, people. We should hang our heads in shame to the rest of the world that we have this ability to vote and we don't even use it. Half of us. I mean, if you get 65%, roughly 70%, you're going to lead the nation. To me, what happened to 90? maybe what we need, and here's what I've been an advocate for now, rather than having all these holidays that we celebrate throughout the year, why not make voting a holiday so that no one goes to work that day and no one will have an excuse then not to participate in the system, whether you like it or not? Because what would you use then as an excuse if you get the day off? And maybe we need to make Dennis some penalties. If we give them the day off and they don't vote,
They get penalized for 4 and 8 years after.
no, I say that just having fun. I'm having fun. Got to remember now, when I was governor, I used to have to say that's a joke, joke, joke to the media 3 times before they get it. Otherwise, you get in deep trouble. But anyway, to me, one of the major problems we have is our current system today makes voting difficult. Voting shouldn't be difficult. One of the great reasons I won in Minnesota is because we make it easy. Same-day registration. The day of my election, when no one gave me a chance to win, when I got there that night at 6 o'clock and we got our first results, you know what the first thing we heard was? The lines to register are longer than the lines to vote. I turned to my people, smiled, and said, we're going to win. Because these new people ain't coming out and registering to vote for Democrats and Republicans. Something has motivated them. They're coming out for another reason. Sure enough, they expected a 50% voter turnout. I was polling 27. Now remember, this is a three-person race, so all those numbers change now. It ain't 50 no more to win. I was at 27%. They were calling a three-way race. 50% predicted voter turnout, ended up 60. I got all 10%, 27 to 37 and won. All by the people they didn't expect to come out. But they got motivated to do so.
Jesse, you got into the debates too.
What's that?
You got into the debate.
Yes, well, I'll
huge.
talk about that briefly. The Democrats were responsible. But don't think they were doing it to be nice and fair. That wasn't the reason. They felt that through my fiscal policy of being fiscally conservative, that I would take away votes from the Republican, thus assuring a Democratic victory. There was one thing they didn't count on. Along with being fiscally conservative, I'm hugely socially liberal. So that makes me a Democrat. See, you can't be fiscally conservative and socially liberal and be in either of these parties today. You got to be both one way or both the other way. And the majority of us are like me. Fiscally conservative, less government, socially liberal. Get government out of our bedrooms. Get government out of our lives as much as possible. With that, I don't care if gay people get married. It's got nothing to do with me.
Legalize gay marijuana.
Yeah, legalize gay marijuana too. Absolutely.
Dennis, did you have any?
Actually, we only
I got
want
bumper stickers out there that say that.
Wait a minute. We only want legalized lesbian marijuana because it's the female plant that counts. So we don't need to worry about the
Dennis,
male end of
please.
that plant. But anyway, to me, it's a matter of people. When I say it's our fault, because Jefferson told us in this great country, if we weren't vigilant and we didn't hold our government's feet to the fire, this great experiment would fail. It will fail. Well, it's coming true, isn't it? It's failing. Why? Because we're not participating like we should be.
And what you
we
say,
will.
Jesse.
back off now.
No, don't back off. What you say about participation is absolutely true. I just want to share some of my experiences. I won my first election because somebody about your size tore the door off the hinges of a polling place so the police and the election officials could rush inside and impound the ballots because the ward machine in the old Ward 7 in Cleveland was getting to, they had paper ballots and they were getting ready to try to make up what they understood was a difference they needed to win, and they were going to invalidate paper ballots. And so I know, I personally have knowledge of what this means. I have some other feelings about why people don't vote. One of the things that I find the most difficult to reconcile about, the time that I've spent in Washington, and I'm still there, in discussions with people, but I go back about 20 years now in the Capitol, is the way that both political parties have benefited from war. And that if I were to be able to identify the single greatest threat to our nation today, it's this fact that we have a type of thinking that is pursuing an American imperium. We have over 800 bases in 132 countries. Just a few days ago, the Senate okayed the largest budget for the Department of Offense that has $700 billion. That's more than almost the rest of the world put together, more than the next 10 countries. Well, the Department of Defense can't pass an audit. My first year in Congress, they admitted that they had over $1 trillion worth of accounts they couldn't reconcile. Today, it's $3 trillion. They're spending money hand over fist. We don't even know where the money goes. This is theft on a grand scale. Meanwhile, they're prosecuting wars all over the world that are based on lies, pure and simple. 2002, I circulated to members of Congress my own analysis that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, al-Qaeda's role in 9/11, Iraq didn't have the intention, capability of attacking the United States of America. There was no proof they had any immediate weapons of mass destruction they could use against the United States. Gave that to every member of Congress. And yet we still went to war against Iraq, and all of a sudden, years later, people saying, well, if I'd have only known then what I know now. No, people knew back then. The Democratic Party ran to get control of Congress in 2006 on opposition to the war. The party came back in and continued to fund the war. This is the kind of game that goes on. I ran for president in 2004 to end the war. That constituency percolated up. This state, I had the largest delegation among my own delegates. I took it all the way to convention. But Colorado, there you go. Thank you, Colorado. But Colorado was the largest delegation that I had of delegates. People were fed up with the wars. Right now, 16 years in Afghanistan, 15 years in Iraq, and over and over, every single war we're in based on lies, misrepresentations. And to me, if we challenge this and talk about a peace dividend that actually, we could have a totally different way of life in this country. But what an analog of this free spending for war is the national security state. Yep. The FBI, the NSA, and all those other alphabet agencies are responsible for executing the erosion of civil liberties in this country. That how many people here, just a show of hands, how many people here will occasionally have the experience of having to think if you want to send a certain email about a certain subject? How many here have had the experience of being careful on the phone about saying certain things because you're concerned about what might be said? Look, one of the agencies tapped my phone as a member of Congress. They tapped my phone in my office when I had the Gaddafi family calling me saying, hey, we've done everything they've asked for. Why the hell are they attacking us? And I took that information over to the State Department and the White House. They wouldn't return the call. But what I found out years later, somebody gave the transcript of the call that I had, which was entirely legit, entirely in keeping with the constitutional prerogative that Congress has on a speech and debate clause, and whether to declare war or not. Article 1, Section 8 belongs to Congress. Didn't matter. This thing was released, and it was used to try to indicate that somehow I was doing something that wasn't appropriate, which was baloney. So, I'm mentioning this because we're talking about getting people to vote. Well, what's it really about? What's the game? Right now, about 50% of federal spending goes for the military and the wars. Yep. And well, we have an obligation to defend our country. They're taking that love that we have for America, the commitment that we have to our nation, and they're just trashing it cynically. And they're looking at us like we're just a bunch of fools. And it's both parties. You know, and liberal conservative doesn't mean a thing in Washington. It's all a fraud. Because you look a few days ago, some of the people who voted for the $700 billion budget, you know, have been attacking Donald Trump left and right. They gave him more than he asked for, and they're Democrats. And the Republicans, you know, fiscal integrity doesn't matter when you're talking about that. So there's a scam that Smedley Butler, Jesse and I were talking earlier, said war is a racket. Absolutely 100% right. And I've called BS on it repeatedly. And to me, you know, this is the single most important thing we have to confront to get people to go back to vote. Unfortunately, Bernie, who's a friend of mine and who, you know, truth be told, in the primaries I voted for, he didn't talk about this the way he should have. I mean, it needs to be said. This needs to be an overriding concern, because I'll tell you why. I'll just close out with this. You know, right now, the U.S. has had 1,030 nuclear test explosions since the beginning of the nuclear age. Russia, the old USSR, 715. China, 45. North Korea, this is an updated one, probably about 8. And to look at to put this in a context, Russia has 7,300 nuclear weapons. The U.S., 6,970. China, 260. Nuclear nations. Look, I have been invited, next Tuesday, I've been invited to speak to the UN General Assembly about nuclear disarmament. And to me, we have no right to consider the extinction of the planet. We don't have that right. Nobody has a right to play God. And yet our government's doing that. And we're baiting North Korea. People look at North Korea and they think, oh yeah, this crazy guy who's the leader of North Korea. No, this is about China and Russia. This is about the U.S. flanking China to the north and west and Russia to the north and east. And just like Syria was a staging area for a broader war, so too is North Korea. And they want to play games and rattle nuclear sabers. We need to take this on. It's not about a Democrat or Republican. It's about, you know, whether you like life on a planet or you're a total nihilist. So, you know, that's all I have to say at the moment.
All right, Dennis, he says.
Good man. I like to clap for that.
And why I've been, you know, so supportive of Dennis being out there, this does need to be said. But, you know, when you say war is a racket, all I can think of is war/government. I mean, you know, the whole thing. As a libertarian activist, as a young man, a lot of the young people in here, I started becoming aware. And I could see that the Libertarian Party was effective only in so much as it recognized the reason for its existence was to perpetuate this idea, this principle. And the principle, to me, that's why my radio show is Declare Your Independence with Ernest Hancock. The Declaration of Independence, the beginning of this, the promise made to all of us was that the only justifiable purpose for the existence of any government is the defense of the rights of the individual. When it doesn't do that, it's time to alter or abolish. Well, I want to add one. How about ignore, okay? Do we have to have, well, all right, well, it's a good place. Every 2 years for about 3 months, people are paying attention and they, you know, kind of, all right, well, which way are we going to support or just not participate? It's not that I'm apolitical. I mean, I'm very political. But where do I put my time and effort? I mean, I've gone on multiple levels on all the abuses state by state. I've gone through all of this. In Arizona, we get 8% for Congress, telling people not to vote. That's why we get it. So what do? More laws get passed, more restrictions, more difficult to get on the ballot, to the point that I'm tired of messing with that. When you get the cryptocurrencies, when you get the blockchain technology, when the world doesn't recognize borders or boundaries, when you can express yourself and your preferences, but someone that all you have in the developing countries where you have half the population of the planet doesn't have access to the internet, when they have Nexus putting up mesh networks in space through CubeSats, And you have people able to vote with a quarter here, a nickel there, $10 a year from billions of people for causes that they want, and open source tech, a leave me aloneism, and I'm going to space and government's not invited. When that happens, you will have real democratic change on a planetary scale. And what we're trying to hold on to here is a waste of time. We are going to go plaid. This is past anything that all of it, but I'm glad Dennis is here. I'm glad. I thought of wearing a boa, man. I was going to have some fun, you know.
Let me tell you, I think you're right when you forecast the end of the nation state. I think that actually is going to happen.
And what's going to replace?
But wait, just keep something in mind that you can say, okay, let's check out and not do this.
I'm not checking out.
Okay, I got it. People say government doesn't work. It's working for somebody.
You damn skippy it is. I don't want to help them.
Yeah, it's working.
I'm tired of supporting the beast that's devouring us. The next generation here, and I'm glad you guys are here to experience and talk to these young people and the technology and to see they're not thinking borders or boundaries. You know, they're above the grid. You know, my whole thing is, here you go, pirateswithoutborders.com. We're not off the grid. We're above the grid. This whole thing is about technology that makes governments irrelevant. But then, only then, it's called Authoritarian Sociopathy, an article written by Davi Barker from Bitcoin Not Bombs. Authoritarian Sociopathy. You read that, it just lays it out really clear. The bottom line is this: the only time government agents ever do what their job is when they see their job as illegitimate and have to try and give it some legitimacy. Because if you just worship them because they got the shiny badge or got elected or I got a clipboard and a fine hat and the always available gun, if that's the only reason that you're listening to what they say, well, they're going to abuse you because they can. When you have the mindset that their role of telling people what to do with no legitimate reason, whatever benefits them in some way, when even they see that they're illegitimate, is the only time that they start doing their jobs. Well, my goal is to make sure that they know they are illegitimate. What they're doing, how you're piecing out, how you're taking the resources of the people to do in the noble cause of how you're going to spend, whatever, all that's going away. Then what? The Libertarian Party, I'll end with this. The Libertarian Party, I remember you go to the conventions, they're the same. They're the same as the other guys. They're doing the same. It's the same kind of people that attracted this kind of power. But the body, you know, as we saw with the Levolution, and even in the Republicans and Democrats, there's a lot of contingencies that are there for the real reason. You saw this. Trump is not, you know, he's nothing but a manifestation of being against the status quo, as much as a billionaire can be against the status quo. But, you know, that is just that perspective that he's not them. The Republicans even hate him. You know, all the networks hated him, you know, until later. And then the Democrats hated him. The media hated him. Well, hell, I hate all them, so, you know, Trump. We do the Trump report every Thursday for 2 years. And what am I saying? You're still voting? But we have fun. And we learn a lot, and he uncovers this deep state thing. But you go to a Libertarian Party convention, and I'll tell you the joke. 2 of them. One, what's the difference between an anarchist and a libertarian? About 2 or 3 election cycles, okay? Then you get it. The other thing is, you go to the national conventions, it's a Liberty Nexus. You go there, it's like a high school dance, so that you can go there to find out where the real party is. And the libertarian movement is so much larger outside of it, and it's going planetary. And if you're not addressing the needs, which was the light on the shining light on the hill thing of the United States represented, that your individual rights is what's being supported, that you can do whatever you want. The mindset that I have to go to the blue pages in front of the white pages for the department to give me a permission slip for me to do this great idea, just the idea that I have to go get permission, that is the problem.
Do you pay taxes?
Is the camera on?
No, I mean, you know, no, this whole idea that you're talking about, we have to see how the government's been structured.
I know.
Ron Paul and I have talked about this, when, you know, both on the military spending side and on the Federal Reserve. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was created. What did they create the same year? Anyone know what was created the very same year?
Income tax.
The income tax. Why? Because then, you know, they made money equals debt. And we're paying taxes to keep a system going that we don't agree with, but it's set into law. And they took over, the Fed took over the government's ability to be able to coin money, and then they created an income tax so the government could go into debt and the people would pay off the government's debts. This is crazy. So, you know, if you want to look at this from a standpoint of libertarian, whatever you want to call it, to me it's practical. We're getting shafted by this system, and when I talk about the need for a new analysis, we need to have a discussion about what does the architecture of that look like. Would it include online voting using blockchain for security? Very well could.
That was my whole push. In 1994, when I ran for Secretary of State, I understood what was happening. Like, when we go to electronic voting, I mean, I can give you all kinds of horror stories. I mean, if you want to hear it, but not now. But the thing is, I knew. It wasn't like I think I know. I know how corrupt it is. And I felt dirty supporting by participating unless I was against the entire system that was being used to devour my future and that of my grandchildren. So when you talk about Dr. Paul, one of the big things that he did, he was like, just do away with legal tender laws. You know, audit the Fed. Like, I would believe anything they said anyway. I don't give a crap what they do. You know, I don't want to even end the Fed. Just ignore them. I need to be able to be free in what I can do and not be punished for what value I trade with individuals. This is what is going to change everything. If we're messing around on the edges, you're never going to be free because you're always looking for somebody to give sanction to your freedom to do whatever you want. And this country, that was the promise. And they're liars. They are not there to serve my individual interest. They're there to serve all the guys that wanted to meet with these people.
Correct.
You know, at least Jesse didn't meet with them.
Well, if I may hop in, I hope we have a little bit of breathing room because I can feel some questions in the air for sure. But, you know, the Federal Reserve being created in 1913, really with the income tax went to fund the military industrial complex, the money, you know, to candidates today, the two-party duopoly. That is just a business. It's Wizard of Oz. I mean, behind the curtain, they're no different. It's a grand illusion. Teresa Amato's book taught me a lot on that one. But so the $7 billion budget passed by Congress, while we're having these national disasters happening in Harvey and Irma, I mean, where is the heart and the compassion? There is none with these members of Congress. The sort of people that are running our country right now pretty much are all, for the most part, sociopathic individuals. They're about themselves, that play into the rigged system, and in doing so, they are suddenly then puppets for the powers that be, that fund them, that not only fund the candidates, not only fund the media, the Hollywood, and so on. And so we are living in an illusion, a grand illusion of a world that can and will be broken. It's going to be a lot easier. I have to. A lot, you know. So replacing Congress is huge. And we tapped onto cultural change earlier and solution. How do we inspire people to vote? Well, first of all, we need to address the voting system and the fact that the voting machines were owned by Diebold, now owned by Dominion. Guess what? That's funded, by the powers that be that are connected to that. That's a huge problem. How are we going to do that? Well, Dr. Ron Paul once said, if we're ever going to bring about revolutionary change, and I like to drop the R and say evolutionary change, he said two things would need to be involved: the youth and music. And so,
emotion,
hence compassion, and hence the creation in 2014 of the United We Stand Festival, which at the last minute, the bureaucracy, UCLA, attempted to shut it down. We lost keynote speakers like Larry King because of this corrupt system. But you know what? The people still wanted. They still carried it on. And so, we'll be holding our 4th annual United We Stand Festival. We have a place reserved at University of Houston. 100% of the proceeds, get choked up, will go towards the victims of Harvey and Irma relief. And on that stage, we definitely are looking forward and seeking the support to launch the first of many phases, and we have more pamphlets over there, of our election assistant app. Imagine leaders, I feel like Kucinich, Ventura, Dr. Ron Paul, Ernie, we've all played our roles, coming together across the political spectrum, focusing on the things that bring us together, which are far more than what the system, the media, Hollywood, so on, lead us to believe, coming together and igniting a movement to inspire the 18 to 28-year-olds to run for office. Because congressional ratings are at all-time low. According to the Gallup poll, 5 years in a row, independents have been on the rise, surpassing Democratic and Republican parties. So this app will list every single candidate running for election on all different levels. Local is where it's at. Get involved in your local elections. Real change begins from the bottom up. Imagine scrolling up and down, seeing every DR, third-party, independent, running for office. Who's funding their campaigns? What do they believe in? How do they get on the ballot? Oh, click here to learn about experts on paper ballots, like Bev Harris, or blockchain voting, like Follow My Vote. We will be the go-to hub for resources of the electoral assisting, the election assistant app. So I want to end on the note of going into the questions, our slogan of free and equal elections, Article 1, Section 3 of the Constitution, Illinois Constitution, all elections shall be free and equal. Our slogan is more voices and more choices. And I personally, you don't have to answer now, but I invite these three gentlemen to join our stage at the United We Stand Fest at the University of Houston. We hope the mayor will be there. We will have a lady who unfortunately lost her two parents in the flooding, it looks like, on our stage to speak and sing. So this is what it's about. United we stand. The two-party system has attempted to divide us. And I am so excited that there is not only the possibility for blockchain voting, but that we have blockchain technology. We have alternative voting methods. Years ago, already had 36 states, many years ago, we had alternative currencies introduced, voting methods, that is, currencies. Oh, I get it back and forth. I'm a little confused on that one. So, but we definitely, I love the idea of something like Bitcoin, Nexus token, giving the Federal Reserve a little bit of competition or putting the Federal Reserve out of business, because it has not served we the people. And I have learned a lot about the Federal Reserve from a new friend of mine, Mr. G. Edward Griffin over there, the creature from Jekyll Island. So I had the privilege, he invited me into his home, which was really down the road where I live, for 1 hour turned into 5 hours. So I'm looking forward to speaking, walking, learning from intellectuals like him, these gentlemen here, and picking your brains, all this stuff, but as friends and people who care about our country as individuals. So, and Ernie, so thank you so much. I don't know if you had a final say, if we want to go straight into questions, because of the time. Go into questions, you guys? Okay, let's do it. Woo! I'm going to go with the lady in the...
So we're here at a conference about Bitcoin, blockchains, or decentralized technologies. Why is it that nobody here is talking about starting a decentralized, quote-unquote, party or a decentralized form of government?
Well, these guys over here jumping out of their chairs, the Mises Institute, they're inside the libertarian space. There are divisions. And it's based on how do they take advantage of the system as it is now, or do we just break it and start a new system based on what? This technological advantages and abilities for us to make people's voices more heard, I don't know more communication other than freaking my money. Now I know Dennis may disagree, and whether money is speech, but this whole thing that you're talking about has been advocated by the techs and the libertarian movement for as long as I can remember. The problem is that the political system does not want to support the concept of the power of the individual. It's always a collective. It's always what group you're in. It's always who you identify with. Well, I self-identify as the smallest minority, freaking me. When do I get to do that?
Actually, it's...
Identity of what government is. If it's really just people voting for policies and for...
See, you're thinking voting. See, that's you can't distill the expression of people's desires. The market does that. Voting is just kind of a distraction. It's where we put our money. It's where we put our time. It's where we put our effort.
No, excuse me. we are on the threshold of dramatic change nationally. Obama's election intimated that change was going to happen. He didn't deliver it. Because he didn't deliver, that opened the door for Trump. He's not going to be able to deliver because of the system. The unfulfilled aspirations of the people are seeking expression, and they will continue to do that. This is absolutely the wrong time to drop out. We need more people, not less. We need people who are going to come in by the tens of millions and say, to hell with the government we have right now, we're going to change it, and to devolve to the local level. Look, the bigger the federal government gets, it starves local governments, which I was a mayor, of resources. It starves state governments of resources. If you want to have some devolution of power, you know, starve the beast in Washington, cut off the funds for these wars, and start to take care of things back home, where the democratic experiment really started there. It was not a big government experiment, it was a small government experiment.
Imagine a movement quickly.
What, like a
replacing-
revolution?
If
Like
I may,
tens of
Ernie.
millions of people doing what they wanted? Why is that always overlooked? They're
Ernie,
going,
why don't
Ernie,
you
you're
let
out
me
of politics. Of
complete my
course I'm not
comment?
out of politics. I've been right in the middle of it, slinging and having some impact, and it changes the culture. Well, it really has a difference. Vote, don't vote. That's
If
not
I
the
may-
point.
If I may, if I may, imagine a movement replacing every member of Congress, only a couple hundred seats, and them being independent-minded candidates that are maybe scientific.
How would I
Maybe
get
they're
in
the
there?
kind of candidates that would support decentralizing. So we've got to bridge our way. It seems the first thing we need to do is get Congress is not suiting our needs. That's the first bridge, and then let the people decide. There's no ends to the possibilities of that. Any more questions?
I want to interject
lots
something
of
here.
questions.
Yeah.
When we start arguing about voting or not voting, how would I have gotten elected in Minnesota as an independent to be able to do what and create and establish what happened if people would not have voted?
Oh, no, I'm with you, brother.
How would I have been governor? I wouldn't have been.
It was a culture thing. Voting and elections are a side effect of the desires of the people. If you think voting is going to all of a sudden make us free, you haven't been paying attention.
Well, this gentleman here, his hand went right up.
It will if you elect the right people.
Absolutely. If the people, if you
And
even
the
could,
only way
the
you
system
can
even
elect
work.
them is by voting.
Through conversations, we
I
can bring
can't
about
become
solutions.
benevolent
This gentleman here,
dictator
next
because I
question.
decide
We got a
to
lot
be.
of questions. Right here. Go ahead.
Voting has some enormous ramifications. One of the most important ones is on voting, because voting is broken. We know there's lots of fraud. I had a conversation with a.
There isn't a lot of fraud.
West Point.
It isn't getting on that list, I can tell you that.
Wait a minute. When I was governor of Minnesota, we did a major to see what fraud was so irrelevant, it was laughable. That's why when I hear this crap come out, we got to check voting, this fraud is running rampant. Who organizes fraudulent voting? I've never seen criminals in the neighborhood go, let's get people together
Ballot
and down to
access,
the polls.
there's the fraud right there.
There's a difference between voter fraud and election fraud.
Okay, I
Election fraud, voting machines. we
I
can- we
understand
can
that part of
definitely
it,
agree
and
on
I'm
that.
all for paper ballots. Keep these machines out of the
Your
system.
question?
In my conversation with the Secretary of State of an East Coast state this week, talking about the blockchain, he was unfamiliar with the power of what it was. We talked about it, and I gave him some of the ideas of what they could use. That weekend, he had me on a call with the Secretary of State, the CIO, the head of cyber of this state, and they were enthralled about the concept of using the blockchain as an overlay to their existing election system, where everybody could be issued a receipt as they walked out. They could take that receipt, go back to their desktop, type in the serial number or the QR code, and ensure that their vote got counted for Hillary. Also, with a personal identity, they could ensure that
With the hacking that goes on today, you can ensure anything on the internet?
Blockchain. So question or
I
comment,
should
or we
announce
go
to everybody here, you know, all this stuff about cell phones throw me out of the loop. I've never owned one and I never will.
Well, I mean, there is the question,
So
do
when you
we,
talk all that stuff to me, you're talking to blind, because I don't own one.
it's a political one. As a congressman from Ohio, governor of Minnesota, what do you think the reaction will be to state and local governments about locking down the integrity of the elections, which will increase everyone's belief in.
Freaking good start.
Get the right people in office to lock it down. Current ones lack integrity and accountability, so we got to replace them.
Well, I can only answer for Minnesota. In the last decade or so, we've had some elections that have been right to the wire. And I am so pleased that we use paper ballots in Minnesota where you can individually count every one of them. So we were able to determine through recounts who won. And I have no doubt that the person won because I do not like computerized voting. That's the easiest way to hack into the system and do massive type of fraud, where to me, if you stick with paper ballots, you'll never have the massive type of fraud because each one is counted individually in the end. Some things don't get better with age. Sometimes staying primitive, like not owning cell phones, can give you great peace of mind and integrity.
To answer your question from an Ohio's perspective, the Secretary of State controls elections in most states, and he or she appoints the officials. And during the 2000 and the 2004 elections, the Republicans who were running the state elections had more voting nodes or places available in Republican areas and not quite as many proportionally in Democratic areas. And so in that way, they were able to influence the election because people would come in and they find they were in long lines in some areas because they didn't have enough places to vote. And in other areas, they could go in and vote right away. And that, you know, the structure of an election is determined by political parties. Here again, goes back to the duopoly. There are state constitutional changes that need to take place. So you can break the duopoly that exists that enables one party to gain advantage over another at a state election level, which has implications in national elections because of the, electoral college.
I think we,
With paper ballots, even they're not immune to fraud. What's happening in California?
True.
There are some groups going around with iPads, knocking on doors, targeted doors, saying, "We represent Save the Whales. Would you like to save the whales? If so, sign this iPad." They sign with their digital finger. They go back to headquarters, lift the digital signature from the iPad, and apply for their action.
Well, California needs to do a lot of new things. They replaced a governor out there fraudulently. When you took out Gray Davis, how come they allowed people to sign petitions that couldn't even prove they voted in the first place? It should have only been people who voted would have the right to sign that petition to recall Gray Davis. So you in California got a lot of work to do on a whole lot of stuff that wouldn't necessarily apply to me in Minnesota. We do it better.
Can we get like 30 seconds each or something, and then,
close up?
because they got to kick us
Done.
out?
Yeah, we're done. 30. I'm sorry on the questions. I know, I wanted more time for it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that you understand how supportive I am of all three of these people and have been for years. Why? Christina and I have become friends. I was one of her biggest advocates. I always say nice things about Dennis Kucinich. Jesse, it's been real, man. We've been having some fun, a lot of the stuff that you accomplished. But I can't let it go that people think that Ron Paul lost. Of course he didn't lose. We are seeing the ramifications of this throughout the rest of my lifetime and my children and grandchildren. It was a manifestation of the will of people to influence the politics worldwide. And if we ignore that, you never take on these opportunities for us to get out of the system, to break the borders and boundaries. That's what I want to support. I use the Libertarian Movement, Party, my radio show, news site, freedomsphoenix.com, everything to change the culture so that they are successful in what they're doing. They're the manifestation, the result of a change in culture. It doesn't work the other way around.
Talking about, thank you. Talking about walking the talk. In 2004, when I was one of two candidates that went to the convention, Kerry was the other one, I was asked if I got the nomination, who would I think about being my running mate? Does anyone here know what my answer was? Ron Paul, that's right. So that, with that, in terms of how do you look at it, you want to change things, we have to shake up the system and the way it is constituted, and the way you do it is running
Right.
and getting people to vote.
Oh, no, I run.
Jesse, final thoughts, Jesse? Quickly.
Again, to me, the system is broken. The two parties have created a system based completely on the concept of bribery. And until you get the money out of the elections, I don't think you can have pure elections in this country. It's got to start with campaign finance reform. You can't, and the recent Supreme Court decision stating corporations are equal to citizens, when that happened, I looked at my wife and said, America may have just fallen. That decision alone may have destroyed this great country until it gets repealed or something happens with it. Because my only answer is this: if corporations are going to be citizens, then let them pay at the same fucking tax rate I do. Excuse my French, if you will. But if they're going to be citizens, then they ought to pay at the same tax rate that I do. And I believe it's 20% right now, if I'm not, is it higher or lower? I don't know. But I know I pay way more than that. Whenever I do a deal, I know cut it in half. I'll get 50%. The other 50's going to Sam.
And I do pay my taxes.
And I want to wrap up just a final thing, that I had the privilege of meeting a true heroine, and I think I was the last one to interview her one-on-one. Amelia Boynton Robinson of Selma, a voting rights matriarch. Of 104 years of age, she passed away about 2 years ago. She was slated to be our keynote speaker at our second annual United We Stand Fest, and she passed away 2 months prior to that. And this woman registered people to vote in the 1920s with her mother in a buggy wagon. She was the person who brought Martin Luther King to Selma. She was the one beaten, left for dead, tear gas on the bridge of Selma. Martin Luther King came in. That turned into Bloody Sunday, a day that changed America for 50 years, the March of Bloody Sunday. And so I urge everybody in this room, everybody on social media, everybody you share this with, to do what Amelia did. In '64, she ran for Congress, the first African-American woman to run for Congress. And she garnered 10% of the vote, when only 1% of African-Americans were registered to vote at that time in Alabama. This is the type of person that I feel the current Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is in Selma, named after a Ku Klux Klan member. People are tearing things down. Let's build things up. Let's rename that bridge to someone that is the earning of it, Miss Amelia Boynton Robinson. So I urge people to not be pessimistic. This culture, the system is trying to make us think we can't overcome it, but we can and we will. Because if you give up, if you're pessimistic, you are a part of the problem. And that is not an option. We have to and will unite to become a part of the solution. So I urge you all, if you want to check out Free and Equal, freeandequal.org, our United We Stand Fest. We're going to be launching our 5th Indiegogo campaign. We haven't fallen short yet to raise, I guess, $11,000 to put on this fest at University of Houston. And anything over that goes totally towards the relief funds. So I thank you so much. Run for office. Get engaged. If you can't run, volunteer for a candidate that you support. Hopefully these gentlemen, others can join the stage to urge these independent-minded, accountable candidates to run for office targeting the 2018 congressional races. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Nexus Earth.